I'll get started in the interest of time, but I want to say what an honor it was to share the panel with my comrades and colleagues from Guatemala. I'm very honored and very humbled, and I want to thank Professor Marcia Esparza for convening us and for translating, and to thank them for coming here to share their important work and to deeply inform us. I also want to thank Cameron Afari for his documentary and technological assistance. Yeah. My presentation hitchhikes on the work of my Guatemalan comrades. I appreciate the way they pointed attention to the root causes and the structural forces that create the conditions of street children. And I want to share with you the work of imagination of the so-called gangs, street organizations that I've worked with in Chicago, the almighty Latin King and Queen Nation. And I have probably more slides than what there is time, so I'll probably rush through them. But I hope I get to the slides. When I found out that I was sharing the panel with my Guatemalan colleagues, I selected slides of some of the Guatemalan members of the Latin Kings that I've worked with. Some of these street children who in the transnational global violence processes of displacement are now Latin kings and queens in Chicago. Just briefly, because Luis Barrios is right, everything must be situated in a socio-historic political context. My view of so-called gangs, street organizations, is that they are creative, imaginative adaptations, responses to geopolitical structures of dislocation, displacement, degradation. They are works of imagination. That's the part of it I want to focus on. That in the cracks and crevices and ruptures that have been created by the seismic restructuring of the economy from a manufacturing economy to the two-tiered service economy, which has grotesquely polarizing inequities, spiraling differences between the haves and the have-nots. Like within these ruptures and cracks and crevices, that's where gangs gather and create these alternative worlds, these alternative cultures. And I want to just focus on their creative, expressive, performative communication practices. That's why it's titled Street Literacy. I actually, try to take their work of imagination very seriously, and it's been a way for me to listen and to try to learn from them. I mean, in addition to the field work of talking with them face to face, they create these amazing cultural documents, which I'll show you very soon. Amazing site-specific street art performances. That's what gang graffiti is. It's like a site-specific, in-your-face street theater, where the contagious touch of the dangerous classes that have to be fingerprinted, it's like fingerprints in your face. This dreaded touch of the dangerous classes comes back into public space and leaves its prints, its traces on public space and private property. And that's why in Chicago there's a moral panic, there's a hysteria about it. The mayor has graffiti busters. Millions of dollars are spent. It's associated, gang graffiti is associated with bullets. It's this performative experience, it's considered, the mayor says that. It's just like a bullet. It's as dangerous as a bullet because it's anticipatory and it's linked to the violence. And that's why it has to be eradicated, which is the first move in the elimination of these street children. Eliminate their expressive documents and then incarcerate, and tragically, with our execution policy, one of the few countries that, it's not a metaphor, that leads to elimination of them. So, as I've tried to pay careful attention and take very seriously They're writing on the wall. That's why I call it literacy, because they use it. They consider it literacy. What I'm writing here is the heart broken in half, is what Latino Boy says. And so it pivots. It's a deeply ambivalent form of writing communication. It pivots on a dialectic between display and disguise. It's hooded. It is pivots on spectacle and secrecy. So they go to great lengths to make spectacles out of their writing on the wall, while simultaneously they take great care to mask it, to mystify it, to encrypt it, to hood it. So I see this ocular paradox as a very imaginative response to the visual predicaments within which they live and struggle, the visual politics of dominant culture. The feminist critic Donna Haraway tells us that vision is always a question of who has the power to see, and the violence in our visualizing processes. And so these kids, like many subordinate cultures, they suffer, they're caught in this whiplash contradiction predicament. They suffer from too little visibility and too much visibility. They are erased, and then they are simultaneously overexposed in the machinery of surveillance and the scopic powers of dominant culture. So they're just shuttled back and forth in this whiplash, this aftershock between effacement and erasure, and then being exhibited in the media as grotesque freaks and gothic monsters, archetypes of violence. So this is their overexposure by surveillance. And there you can see this this optical paradox. So they're overexposed, they're in a target, they're targeted, you know, as the enemy, public enemy number one from the Chicago Crime Commission. So that's the overexposure. But then what is erased, what is annihilated, is their humanity, their faces, their vulnerable faces that you know, their voices that are both strong and articulate and conscious and sometimes vulnerable, the catch in the voice. All of that is what is being annihilated. Okay, and so this world, this performance culture that they create in Chicago, and I'm sure this goes on elsewhere, but I know it best because I've been paying attention to it in Chicago. It creates this world of identity and a culture of community and camaraderie and dignity. It's all about respect and discipline and structure and purpose and even spirituality, especially spirituality. Being a member of the Almighty Latin King Nation, you're in touch with something sacred, with something that is larger than yourselves. And that's, you know, these are just basic human needs. And so this is my friend, and what you can see here is mainstream society, Mayor Daley's graffiti blasters. This is like a scar, it's a defacement, it's a crime against public property. You read the letters to the editor, it's described as human sewage, as waste, this writing on the wall. It's got to be, it's offensive. It's signs of their primitivity and their animalistic. The Chicago Police Department says that this is like dog and fire hydrant, marking of territory, like a wild animal urinating to mark his territory. That's the way they describe this. But when you listen to my friend Latino Boy, they speak about this with great purposeness and consciousness and critical awareness. It's deeply meaningful for them. It has its own grammar. I'll try to just share a little bit of that with you today. Whatever else you want to say about this, whatever else you want to say, this is not a pathology of social disorganization, as the Chicago School of Sociology describes this. They're highly mobilized, structured, and so forth. And he is speaking about that. And this is King Love. Literally, it's not, they write this on the wall and they call it out as a rite of greeting. And this is like the first mural I will give you because I think it's foundational. And it taps into Che Guevara's, I love his phrase, the radical politics of love. This is not a bourgeois masculinity, where being a male and a man is autonomous, guard your boundaries, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, where you don't express emotions, period. God forbid, male to male, same sex. You don't need to tell you in this room. It's lots of expression of love and solidarity and brotherhood and sisterhood. And as they say, that's what this is all about. This is the way they characterize, they literally write King Love, but then they say every other mural, which has another content, they still say, that's all about love. That's writing our love on the wall. That's making this our hood, this space of shelter and protection and meaning. Okay, now there's a precise grammar to this, and I'll just give you a little taste of it. But it's not at all random. In Chicago, there are two super street organization coalitions. There are two. There are hundreds of street organizations, so-called gangs, in Chicago. But as a result of the prison incarceration campaign in the 80s, and they're coming into close contact in the prisons, they had to get more organized because the hundreds of gangs are all of a sudden sharing cells. And so they created this two super confederation coalition between the people and the folks. And so that's the grammar of all of these. And then if we've got time, this grammar also comes to the body. But so people and folks, to give you a few of the grammatical street grammar rules, people, the sacred number is 5. Folks is 6. So this is the Latin kings that I live with, and they are the largest people nation gang. So that's why the crown is 5 points, and the star is 5 points. When you go through the urban landscape, they can read this the way someone else would read a Shakespearean sonnet, with all this attention to detail and nuance and subtext, because there are 6-point crowns, and there are 6-point stars. They read all of that. And then that has the deep meaning that taps into the spirituality. The reason why the number 5 is sacred for the almighty Latin King nation of Chicago, sorry to go so fast, is it stands for the cardinal virtues: love, honor, loyalty, sacrifice, righteousness. And the reason why the number 6 is sacred for the Folks Nation Coalition is that stands for the 6 sacred folk nation values of knowledge, understanding, wisdom, love, loyalty, life. And then there's other things going on here. The colors, of course, black and gold, the same as the New York Kings, because gold stands for the shining flames and rays of the sun, all glowing together in one unity, the solar symbolism, and black because it stands for Mother Earth. So I lived in Big Red in a tenement for the first 4 years of field work. These are 2 boarded up windows from where I lived, just so you could get a sense now of how to look at this. There's 2 forms of street literacy. This is alphabetic. Sometimes they spell out the entire word like King Love. Sometimes they use the acronym, the abbreviation, LK, Latin King, DG, Disciple Gangster, SCR, Simon City Royal, and so forth. So that's alphabetic literacy, but they also use icons, images. And so the kings use a crown. That's the crown, but it's a 5-point crown. And then it gets complicated because their rivals are the disciples. And the disciples are folks, so their icon is a pitchfork. Like the peasant revolution, the pitchfork has often been a symbol of peasant insurgency. But because they are folks on the other side, and this is king turf, the pitchfork is upside down. So they can they can throw up their love on the wall, like affirmatively with the crown and by spelling out King Love and so forth, or they can do it a kind of affirmation by negation. Like this would be a two-handed way of doing the crown, but if you were a folks nation person, then you could like break it, or this is throwing up the crown, and if you were folks, you could diss it by putting it upside down. So there's these complex semiotic strategies of affirmation by negation, spelling acronyms backwards, putting images upside down, inversions, or fractures. Okay, to see if you're still awake, what turf are you on?
Oh, it's down.
See, this is Latin King. This is across the street from Big Red. And see, they love to kick it. So it's not just like you just like straightforward bourgeois literacy. You make your point and then move on. They're into embellishment and lavish enrichment and ornamentation. They delight in that. So this would probably be enough by bourgeois standards. LK, you would know it's Latin Kings. But then just to kick it, there's the number 5. Again, affirmatively, because they are people nation. But do you see what the 5 is doing? It's cracking a 6-point star. And then this is an upside down pitchfork. So just the idea is the complexity, the intelligence, the artistry, the competencies, the creativities. This is like another one. This is Latin Kings, black and gold, upside down pitchfork. And again, I'm going to rock through the others, but I'll give you more of the details of this. But the point is, it just goes on and on and on, the intricacy and complexity of it. All gangs in Chicago also rap with a cross with dots. Folks Nation gangs, it's a cross with 3 dots. And People Nation gangs, it's a cross with 2 dots. So look at the complexity of this. The Latin Kings are people, right? So they had the choice. This artist had the choice of doing a cross with 2 dots, right side up, but he's made the artistic choice of inverting the rival cross with 3 dots. You see that? And then of course the Latin Kings, there are thousands of members, and it breaks down. The primary unit of organization is a branch or chapter, so that it's no larger than 30 or 40, so that there's face-to-face familiarity and bonding and love and all that. And so each branch is identified by the street corner where they hang out. And so where I live, Big Red, was the Lawrence and Kedzie Street branch of the Latin Kings. So do you see the creativity? They're delighting in the parallelism, the performative doubling, the punning of Latin Kings also being Lawrence and Kedzie. And to make sure you get that point, they have street, S-T. But you see what they've done with the T in street? Upside down pitchfork. So that's the idea, this very precise grammar, street literacy. And then this is so that you can see the other way to look at it, to affirm the capacities and the creativities and the competencies, instead of just dumping on these kids as delinquents, defective, the deficits, the deviancies, flipping it to the capacities. Even the way they put up these site-specific street theater murals is drawing on a lot of organizational leadership. It takes like a team, a crew of half a dozen, because this is against the law, and it's 6 months in the juvenile detention center if you're caught doing this. So they can't go get a ladder, you know. They rehearse this, it's got to be done very quickly, very quickly. They rush out, you know, when the police aren't there, they have their lookouts. The block club, respectable citizens, you know, aren't surveilling them. And see, they've solved the technological problem of the ladder. I mean, I love this image, people doing things together. And it's also, their best artist in that branch will be the one which will do a chalk outline. They love the Old English calligraphy. And the spray paint has to be shoplifted because it's against the law to sell spray paint to a minor in Chicago. So this is a lot of interdependent ensemble cooperation. This is another boarded up window in my flat in Big Red, just to get a little more complexity. So you know it's kings, I've given that away. But this is like another way to do it. 5-point crown, sure, but always room for variation and innovation within limits in any oral tradition. So a 3-point crown will also count. So it's a 3-point crown. The one thing you could never have on king turf would be a 6-point crown. So you've got a 3-point crown, and then see, locked in struggle is this 6-point crown. But it's upside down, because that's the icon of the imperial gangsters, and they are folk nation. And so they go with the number 6. So it's a 6-point crown, imperial gangsters, not dyslexic, the G is reversed, because as a strategy, you see. So they've taken this from the Imperial Margarine advertising campaign. You would probably recognize it if we could, you know, if you could turn your head around. That's just been appropriated from the Imperial Margarine 6-point crown advertising campaign. So this is the 5-point star. And then this is the icon of the Vice Lords of Chicago, which is the 3rd largest gang in Chicago, and they are also people. Their icon is the dandy's cane. They sometimes use gloves. And so they're on the top privileged part of the mural. They're signaling solidarity. And you can't see it, we've lost it, but above that is the word amor spelled out, A-M-O-R, which of course is love again, but they say is a coded acronym for Almighty Masters of Revolution. So they, like many other street organizations, are rooted, you know, they grew out of nationalist Black Panther, they get this in the prison liberation theology, and so forth. So there's that incipient consciousness. We heard yesterday on the panel, like BLOODS is an acronym for Black Liberation Organization of Defense. Amor, Almighty Masters of Revolution. Okay, that's the word folks. And what turf would you be on?
4.
See, folks, with the 6-point star alone would let you know that you were on folks' turf. And you would understand why the L is reversed in LK. Because they don't want to be performing and repping the Latin Kings, their acronym. So they reversed the L there. Same, just 4 blocks away, same word. But what turf are you on now? People turf, yeah. See, now the F is upside down, lest you miss the point that in spelling out F-O-L-K, the LK is Latin Kings, they've kicked it, they've put that little punctuation in, the hyphen, so that you don't miss that point. And this, there's not time to get into, but this is more complex affirmations by negation. Oh, this is, I do want to go back. I'm very moved when the artist signs, the artwork. They don't always do. This is Chiquito. And this is my friend from Guatemala. And this is Chiquito. This is one of the street children from Guatemala. He didn't have a father. His mother was in prison. She was a revolutionary woman. When he was 5 years old, he witnessed the torture of his uncle, Hector, who then they found his body. So that's why they had to escape. So this is Chiquito from Guatemala. And you can see the king. Now we're getting into the bodies. This is the icon of the crown. Now the grammar for the body, because the bodies mirror, and they're really like mobile scripts. They mirror what is on the wall. But the grammar of the body is left, right. But it's from the point of view of the performer, the actor. So it'd be like stage left, stage right. So all people nation rep to the left. And all folks nation rep to the right. And so that would be like with the baseball cap, with the bill a little bit over to the left, a little bit over to the right. The earring in the left ear, the right ear. The jeans torn on the left leg or the right leg. The bib overalls, one left strap up, right strap down. Even like subtle things, the belt buckle, a little bit left of center, a little bit right of center. Greek theater. Here you can see there are Latin kings, of course, the crown. This is a 6-point crown, upside down and broken in half. Think of the complexity of that, the work of imagination. The baseball cap to the left, not by accident that the left leg is turned out. Their bodies are just choreographed. They just learn this. It's like a street choreography, which they do with incredible grace. He's repping up. You can rep up. It's called crossing up. You can do it like this. It's the right hand. If you're repping up to the left, it's the part of the body that's being protected. That's what counts. So I'm repping up to the left because it's my left shoulder that is being protected, that is being sheltered. You can also rep up like this. This is repping up to the right. You can kick it. You can use the icon as my friend here is doing, like that, infinitely. Next to the baseball cap, the tennis shoe is a very important item of the theatricality of the streets and what they do with the tennis shoes. You now know why Converse tennis shoes are bestsellers in Chicago. You know, you can't find them in certain neighborhoods. The 5-point star. Now you also have to look the way the number of laces. Whether you do 5 eyelets, the folks nation would do 6 eyelets. And then they just kick it with sometimes the color and the texture and the thickness of the laces, and they'll sometimes braid them together. And there's just incredible, imaginative, creative work going on. Oh, can you imagine folks nation gangs also wear Converse tennis shoes? But can anyone guess or imagine how what a folks nation gang would do with a Converse tennis shoe? That's right. They do, of course, the 6 laces. Yeah, great. And then they fold down the flats, thus cracking the 5-point star. And this is my friend, probably one of my closest friends. He's in Cook County Jail right now. He's been there. He's born in Michoacan, not Guatemala. This is very close grow, Michoacan. And kind of watched him grow up. And he's now the leader of the Lawrence and Kedzie branch and is in the Super Crown Council of the Almighty Latin for the entire city. So you see he's crossing up to the left. Can be very subtle. And you can't see it, but the baseball cap is the Kings from Los Angeles, which is a hockey team, but it's Kings, so he's wearing that. And of course they love, it's not just because they love Michael Jordan, his number, 23. It's of course because 23, 2 plus 3 is 5. So he's repping. And the handshakes, this is Juan again, the baseball cap to the left. This is Puma from Peru. He was born in Peru, came to this country when he was 9 years old. This shaking on the crown, simultaneously throwing down the pitchfork. This is my apartment in Big Red. And, probably stops it, but I wanted to get to this. Look at that. See, Big Red is one of those neighborhoods, it's not an ethnic enclave. It's the port of entry for refugees and new immigrants. It's the dumping ground. And they're coming from all over now. It's not just the wave of Italians forming Little Italies and so forth. The high school in my neighborhood, The parents speak over 90 languages and dialects. So they're all, I picked Big Red to move in to do the research because by eyeballing the mailboxes and reading the surnames, I could see that over a dozen nationalities and races were living cheek by jowl. Palestinian, Korean, Cambodian, Hmong, Lao, Guatemalan, elderly Jewish, Mexican, Peruvian, Salvadoran. It's just incredible, all living cheek by jowl. So even though it's called the Almighty Latin King Nation, this is another one of their tremendous capacities, and it's a big error of the social science research. They think that gangs are determined by race. And the big error was they failed to account for hyper-segregation in cities. Yeah, the vice lords were 100% black in Chicago because the west side of Chicago is 100% segregated. They call Chicago Johannesburg by the lake, you see? But as soon as, and the Latin Kings formed in Division Street, which was the Puerto Rican barrio, you know, in the 60s. There was a riot there, and you know more about this than me. And so that was like totally residentially segregated. It was Puerto Rican. But now, over the years, as they've branched out to where I lived and did the work, which is this United Nations of all these people. Look, look. His street name is White Boy. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed. He's a displaced Appalachian kid from West Virginia. He's a straight-up Latin king. And Puerto Rican, born in Mexico, and then also born in Mexico. This is the vice president of the junior Latin kings in Big Red. And you could see he's a leader, he's an emerging leader. He's only like a little shorty here, about 15. He's the junior, he's about 15. And you can see his energy, his exuberance, the cat right to the left, crossing up to the left, all this energy, he's this leader. Can you see him? Is it in focus? He's out of central casting for Huckleberry Finn. He's red-haired, freckled-faced white kid. His street name is Blanco. And again, he's a so-called hillbilly. He's an Appalachian kid from West Virginia. Chicago, we get a lot of those migrants. We get the internal refugees as well as the transnational refugees. And so, see, they do a much better job of building multiracial, multi-ethnic solidarities and coalitions than mainstream institutions do. These are the little Cambodian refugee kids from Cambodia. I put that here just so that you can see how they learn this literacy. He's learning this street literacy the way he's learning English as a second language. It's in the air you breathe. You know, some harsh policeman or high school counselor a few years might say, why did you decide to join a gang? You know, as if he chose that the way a suburban kid picks a college. You know, but see, he's these little boys, as innocent as children anywhere. And see, you see what he's doing? He's imitating. He's learning this through play and imitation. But bless his heart, I don't know whether you can see it, he's not in control of the technique. He's repping to the right. He doesn't have, which would be kind of dangerous a few years later. But right now, you know. And that's who he's imitating. That's one again. Got much more, but I think we'll stop now so that there's more questions for our colleagues and so forth. If you've got one more minute, I'll share it because I want to show you Chiquito's, when I was living in Big Red, Chiquito's mother, who was indocumentada, so she had no social security number. She was raising these 5 children, Chiquito, the sisters and everything, and there was drugs in the basement of Big Red. And so she was this intrepid revolutionary woman, and she went to them and said, for God's sake, you know, there are children here. I'm giving you 24 hours to get your drugs out, or I'm going to the police. And they came back the next day, rang her doorbell, and shot her in the eye with her 4-year-old little Vivian right there. So I just want to show you the children. So I've been with these children, and I want to show particularly my compañero friends their altar. This is the women. I didn't get to the women yet, but the women are, of course, all there. Oh, yeah, is that in focus? I'm sorry. So, thank you, Cameron, so much. I'm sorry that the focus isn't holding. 2 months before the mother was killed, this is Negro, Chiquito's younger brother by 2 years, the Guatemalan. And he was killed by gangs. So what this family endured, these kids, within 2 months, they lost their beloved brother Negro, who was 16 years old, and then the mother. This is Negro. He was my neighbor in Big Red, 16-year-old, bright kid. Look at his eyes, bright, full of it. He was a leader of the Latin Kings, and he fell to street violence. But we must never isolate street violence from structural violence. By telling you this story, I could be in danger of contributing to the demonology that these are pathological violence. Violence is always the performance of waste. Structural violence that you have been teaching us about, as well as the street violence. So this is but one of that, because you even understand why they throw down the crowns of the others. Where that rage comes from, the way they're jerked and whiplashed by economic violence and displacement and so forth. And a lot of that anger and rage gets recycled into an oppositional culture, and I've shown you some of that, but some of it, in a heartbreaking way, they cycle back against themselves. You know, the first 18 months that I lived in Big Red, 14 kids were killed within 4 blocks of my front door. So, and Negro was one of them. So, now this is the family that is left. The mother has been killed, and the beloved brother has been killed. This is Chiquito. This is Myra, who at the age of 19, she's the oldest, became the head of household. She's still a juvenile, technically. She became the head of household. This is Lucky, 17 years old, beautiful. And this is little Vivian, the 4-year-old, who saw her mother was at the skirts when the mother was killed. And Chiquito was taking a shower. And then they ran out, and the killers were going to chase them because they were witnesses. And they ran out the alley, and a black man opened his door and let them in. And that's probably why they're alive. But here they are. And so, you know, he's a Latin king, to be sure. When the mother was murdered, then, you know, the police came and authorities came. And just think if they were middle class. Think of the grief counseling. Think of the therapy. Think of the help, the foster help, if they were middle class. You know what happened? And most middle class families wouldn't have endured that in 2 months. Think of that trauma. What they did, the police noticed left shoulder, LK, gang tattoo. He tried to improvise. He said, no, that's my girlfriend. Her name is Linda Kent. They didn't buy it. They put him in jail. I had to bond him out with that. And then the rest of the family went into hiding because they're desperately afraid that little Vivian will be taken away from them. And so the violence, the economic violence, she works in a Korean flea market for sub-minimum wage, but she's very bright, Myra, and she's learned Korean a bit. And so she translates it, so she's very good. So he works her 14, 16 hours a day. She's very bright, 19. And so, but he could, you know, he could exploit her because he could be fined for hiring her. Luki, at the age of 17, worked in a boutique, on the, you know, selling clothes in one of the Central City boutiques. 12 hours a day, sub-minimum wage, no lunch hour, no breaks. If she complained, he's taking a risk even by hiring her. And just so that you can see how this violence compounds, she also has done jail time because a white man assaulted her. And she's very street savvy, and so she fought him off, and she had a penknife in her boot, and she contorted, and she got the penknife, and she slashed his face, and got him off of her. And he just marched home to the telephone, called the police, and they charged her with aggravated assault. It took me 3 days with my friends in the Northwestern Law School to get her out. And she was like calling home to all of them, and she was talking about the solidarity of the other women prisoners, the African American, Puerto Rican. They called her Hijita, they adopted her, they were looking out for her, because she didn't want little Vivian to worry about her being in jail. And then see Negro, that's the one who was killed, the brother was killed, is known by Negro, Chiquito and Negro. And so these are rest in peace. He was beloved. So after he was killed, all over the neighborhood, they put up these murals, Negro, rest in peace. Utility poles, Negro, rest in peace. And I've noticed that this is their brief counseling. It's culturally appropriate. You know, these kids, they lose their friends, they lose their family, there's no counseling. They're further demonized as part of a violent culture. And so by doing this, it's like sites of pilgrimage. This is the Guatemalan family, Chiquito. And I continue to visit them to this day. And you know, they've lost their mother, they've lost their brother. This is Chiquito, a picture of him with the brother Negro. They've created this shrine. And you would understand why it's now gold rosary. They've put together, they draw on Catholicism, they're drawing on curanderismo, espiritismo, santeria. What they've told Vivian, they picked up this Buddha in the alley. You know, whatever kind of spirituality, they just put it all together. I don't know if you can see it, the Buddha has been inscribed with a 5-point star. They've added that. And what they tell little Vivian, they say Negro is with the angels. Negro is in heaven. But our mother has not passed. She is still hovering around, protecting us, watching out for us, looking for us. So this altar, this is the mother. And this was the man she was dating at the time that she was murdered. This is the mother. The shrine is to her. She got this, Myra got this at a flea market. Red, because in Santeria, red is for Chango, has power. And they fill it with water. And so that's so that her spirit can come. Her hovering protective spirit can come and drink the water of that. And this is, I asked them, this is an orange and some flower petals. That's like fertility. It's just to give it more power. And then this is the money here. And I, foolishly asked, I said, what's that about? And it's like, they said, well, they don't even know where the rent money is coming from month to month. So it's kind of like contagious magic. It's like by putting the money there, it's like, with all the other powerful energies, may the money come. Will there be groceries? And then they explained to me that's why they've got $2 bills. Because $2 bill is odd and unusual, and therefore has more power for that. Yeah, that's it. Okay, I wanted you to say, thanks for staying, but I wanted you to